the first decisive result in 5 years in World Championship chess at the classical time control. Who will win this game? Let's take a look. It's a historical game in many ways. It breaks records. It has everything. It's quite long, so let's get to it. This is ASMR Chess, your friendly chess channel, where it is absolutely okay for you to just drift off and fall asleep. So we see d4 from Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces, and Nepomniachtchi, the Russian challenger, plays knight f6. And here in the opening we see, I'll go over the moves here, we see an interesting skirmish. So this looks like an opening called the Catalan, but this particular move order has not really been played before. So it is a pseudo-Catalan variation, and this is the two players trying to outfox each other and bypass their opponent's opening preparation. We see a sort of standard development of pieces, but with the move order being quite original. Here we see b3. It's a bit of a novelty from Team Carlsen. The computer doesn't particularly like this move, and that is something we can't really trust, actually, because the chess professionals working with Magnus Carlsen, including my countryman Peter Heine Nielsen, will have studied this with extremely powerful computers for a long time for Magnus to play this. So that the fact that even on my quite strong computer that it scores this as slightly better for black, that doesn't mean anything. We see c5 from Jan. You know, if Magnus is not going to take the center and fight for it in the usual fashion, then he will. It's captured, which seems like it's that it's maybe not the principled way. You move the same piece twice and you basically help black develop this bishop to a better square. But this is extremely concrete opening play that has been prepared for months by Team Carlsen. So it looks like white is just losing a pawn here. So let's see how Magnus wants to get this pawn back. Okay, so he starts out by pinning the pawn, so now you can't capture here because the bishop hangs to the queen. Then the bishop is protected. Now you can capture here because you can't capture the queen anymore. You can't capture the bishop, I mean, because the queen protects the bishop, right? And I thought, maybe we would take the pawn with the queen, so not to damage the pawn structure and not be material down. But no, Magnus, cool as a cucumber, plays knight to d2, attacking the pawn a second time, and we see knight c6 from Nepo. And I was just wondering, why not pawn takes b3? But here actually this position, even though white is down a pawn, this is quite good for white because white has a very, very strong development. This bishop will be very, very strong either on this square, looking at the king, and on g7, or on this square where it is slicing against the queen side. So instead we just see knight c6, and now Magnus can capture on c4 with the knight, which is way superior to capturing with the queen. The knight cannot be tolerated. It's pushed with b5, and it goes to the center. And here the question is, will this knight be tolerated? I think it will. Let's take a look. Okay, so the knight attacks the queen. We have to look out for this extremely interesting diagonal going on here with the bishop here on the long diagonal. That could lead to some tactics very soon, but for now the queen is attacked. So the queen goes to b2, and this is this game is completely new. This is not something that has been played for many years or anything like that. This is not an known opening system. This is either Team Nepo or Team Carlsen, or probably both. Its opening preparation is completely new and original. Okay, the bishop goes to the long diagonal, counteracting the power of this bishop. And we try to kick the knight away. Knight has to go back, and what we have here is a sort of symmetrical position where we have 2 pawns on the queen side versus 2 pawns on the queen side, and 4 pawns versus 4 pawns on the king side. Both kings have castled, and we have material equality. So maybe it's another boring draw. Well, no. Absolutely not. Knight goes back, attacks the bishop. You don't want to give that away, so you put it on b6. And now we can pin this knight, threaten to mess with black's pawn structure maybe. But Jan says we can live with that. You can pick off my knight. I will be very happy if you give up your dark squared bishop, because my dark squared bishop will be very strong as a result. Magnus is okay, and rather than capturing with the queen and getting the queens off, relieving tension in the position, Jan just captures with the pawn and keeping the tension in the position. Who is better here? It's a bit of a mystery. The computer evaluation kind of likes black just a little bit, but we only at move 18, so quite probably we are still well within both players' opening preparation. Now, Daddy says to put out all the pieces. That's what Father says, and rook to c1, absolutely get all the pieces involved in the game. Now we see something that's probably going to provoke some trades, because this knight is too strong, cannot be allowed there. So first the knight is exchanged. Now the queen is attacked. Where can we put the queen where it will be effective and not as exposed to a long series of attacks that will improve black's position? Okay, to a2. So it looks passive, but Magnus must have a plan here. We see an exchange of the light squared bishops and a check from the queen. King goes back, and Magnus seems quite calm and confident in this position. The queen is coming in, however, threatening possibly the e2 pawn if white's queen ever lose sight of it, and it seems that black is gaining terrain here. So has Magnus been surprised or out prepared in the opening? The queen now has to come to c2 to keep everything together, but we can see that black really is the one who's pushing right now. White works to get all his pieces in the game. The rook on f1, not doing that much. Put it on d1 instead, where it counteracts black's rook and looks at the center. have to use every single resource you have. Okay. So king g7. Let's improve the king. If this turns into an endgame, we want to be closer to the center. We also don't want to be exposed to checks on the back rank. Now rook d2. What's going on here? What is going on here? Is this going to relieve the queen? So the queen doesn't have to look after e2 anymore. Well, we can see that when the queen is attacked, it is traded off. That was about. Magnus said, I will give up my queen for 2 rooks like this, and when I do that, I will need my rook on d2 to look after e2 so it will not fall to the queen. So now we have not asymmetrical position, we have an asymmetrical position because the material is imbalanced. And this is where the magic really happens in chess a lot of the time. Because, you see guys, in a lot of the games that have been played so far, we have had a lot of symmetry going on, the same pieces, the same pawn structures, material balance. And it decreases the risk of making a mistake when you have a compact symmetrical position, because it relieves the tension and the dynamism in the position. But here we have a great dynamism. This is the way you have to play with the queen and bishop is way different from how you have to play with rook and 2 rooks and knight. Some people would say, look at this and say, okay, the rooks are worth 5 and the queen is worth 9, so white is a pawn up or is a point up here. That is not true. That is something that you and me and other humans, mortal human beings, that's how we can think about chess. This is way more complicated than that. For instance, this bishop is way stronger than this knight in this particular sort of position, because this knight is slow if it has to, for instance, attack the king, or if it's needed over here, it will take many moves. But on this board with this great space advantage for black, this bishop is super fast and can be moved to where it is needed. So the bishop is stronger than the knight. The queen could be as strong, or even maybe in some cases stronger than the 2 rooks, depending on the pressure that Jan can or cannot mount in this position. For now, he plays the best move in the position, queen d5, and we have to do something up there for the pawn because it was attacked, and we offer a trade. Jan says no trade. I would like just to emphasize my greater terrain, you know. He's just happy that he is attacking more squares and has some more space. So he keeps the dynamism. And now Magnus is saying, okay, this pesky bishop has to go. And it goes to e5. Now h4 and h5, just trying to keep the position under control. And Jan must be pretty happy in this situation here. At this point in the game, Magnus was under quite severe time pressure, and he would have to rely very heavily on his phenomenal understanding of the game in order to produce moves very quickly, because there is it simply is not possible with a couple of minutes on the clock to calculate precisely. So instead he simply had to believe in his intuition and how he felt about the game, and play the moves that felt right. So how strong is Magnus Carlsen's intuition? Is it good enough to withstand this pressure? Let's Let's take a look. King h2. Why is the king going to h2? Well, he wants to be absolutely safe and get out of any potential attacks against his king. Also, this is a move that's not detrimental to his position in any way. So it's a move that he can make and get closer to move 40. Because we are now at move 31. When we reach move 40, he will get another hour on the clock. That is what he wants. His position is probably okay, but he has to play the rest of these 9 moves until move 40 with about something like 4 minutes on the clock. Now we see one of the problems here. Magnus Carlsen's pawns are fixed on dark squares. This is a dark squared bishop. It's going to attack them. Can we capture it with the knight? No, because there is a queen attacking our rook. So what can Magnus do against this very dangerous attack with the bishop against this pawn? First, let's say we attack the queen, because now the queen obviously has to move, and the queen goes to d6, which is a brilliant move by it looks like by Nepomniachtchi. It looks like the queen could have gone anywhere. It could only have gone to d6. It's the only place where it works. Now, rook d1. That's not very good. Now the computer is saying, well, it really likes black here. It's not saying it's decisive. It's not saying that black is winning, but comfortable positional advantage and maybe soon material advantage to black, because bishop eats the pawn. But rook can take b5, so material balance still almost. Just need to find out who can stabilize from here. Queen attacks the rook. We are at move 35, so Magnus is still under severe time pressure. Will he capture on h5? No, that is too dangerous. So let's keep everything under control. Jan says, well, please give me a little bit more space advantage. Also, by playing e5, you can now no longer see h2. h5, I mean. So I don't have to worry, he says, that you will come and capture this. Magnus is in a bit of a bind here. It's not like he plays these moves because he has to, and they are the ones that he can find that hurts his position the least. But Jan centralizes his queen and keeps the pressure going. Now for Team White, we manage to double up the rooks, so everything is protected. Rooks protect each other, rook also protect the knight protects this pawn, but this a pawn is very dangerous. It's passed, it will come to a1 maybe and become a queen. So the queen is very invested in helping this pawn along the way. How can we stop it? Now we are threatening to capture here. Well, Magnus has some tricks that makes it impossible, because you see rook a2. Now if you try to capture here with the bishop, we will see rook b2, rook d to b2. So instead we try to push this knight away, and the knight attacks the queen. But after queen takes here, we have reached move 40 with knight takes. And queen can take the knight, but then the queen will no longer be able to protect the bishop, and the rook will take the bishop. I will just show, let's see here. Takes, and then takes. And now white is doing very well, because how are you ever going to defend this pawn? We have two pieces that can attack it, only one that can defend it. So this pawn on A will fall, and then we will have two rooks versus the queen, and 4 pawns versus 3 pawns. So that's probably even losing for white. So we do not see queen takes knight. We see queen to b3, and Magnus Carlsen out of the woods here. On minutes on the clock, he has managed to equalize the position, playing on raw chess understanding with almost zero opportunity to calculate lines here. Still there's pressure from black, of course, because the knight on the A, not the knight, but the A pawn, still potential danger. Bishop undevelops itself, just gets out of the way to a place where it is protected by the king, and now the A pawn can start marching. Magnus say, well, I will attack your pawn and your queen. The queen will move, and he will just try his best to keep everything solid here. The rooks doubled up on the second rank will be so far able to stop the pawn when the pawn reaches the second rank. So that is their job right now. Magnus is not trying to win this. Magnus is just trying to defend. So the pawn advances, and will this knight ever be able to capture on h5? We will see. Queen behind the pawn. Let's support the pawn, trying to get to a1. But Magnus says, oh, absolutely no, I will stop you dead in your tracks. Jan attacks the rook. The rook has to move, and is this equal? It looks like Magnus has managed. Managing Magnus has managed to mangle his opponent. No, not mangle, but he has created a situation where it's extremely tough for black to find a way forward and to do something with his queen and bishop and pawn. So he tries with his king instead, improving his king, gaining a little bit more advantage with a more active king. Rook d1. It's a move that doesn't do anything, so it just maintains the tension in the position. Rook is attacked by the queen, but now the rook goes behind the other rook, forms a battery, and this pawn, you could say it's under pressure, but in reality this bishop has everything covered, so we are not going to see an exchange happening anytime soon. We see some shuffling around a little bit of the pieces, and this was the point. The knight wanted to go to d4, where it is protected by a knight. It has a nice central square. It has a potential check here against the king, where you could maybe pick up the queen, the bishop, if the queen moves. But the king says, okay, I will go out of this potential check, and maybe Magnus has managed to have Ian, lose a little bit of time. First advancing with his king, and now having to go back. Magnus tries to advance with his own king, centralizing the queen for black, and we see this amazing move. Rook takes a3. Do we see bishop takes rook? No. We see queen takes h5. So what's that about? That what that is about is that this pawn is pinned by this bishop to the king, so you cannot capture the queen. So this whole sequence was actually an exchange of pawns. The king has to move, and now black has to move the queen because the pawn is no longer pinned. We just continue shuffling the pieces around, but we still have the material imbalance. But how can we make progress from either side? How about that? Attacking the knight. Ooh, look at that. Moving the knight that was pinned to the rook. Well, also this is a discovered attack from this rook against the queen. Small little tactics everywhere. Queen has to move, attacking the knight. Rook defends the knight, attacks the queen, and the queen moves again. So these small moves, it looks like they are not doing anything, but there's so many small tactical nuances that these players have to be aware of at all times. King g2, check again, and f3. So finally, Magnus has managed. That's I guess the word for today. To make some headway. He has pushed a pawn. Is this significant? Absolutely. Because without the pawns, he can't really get anywhere. His advantage in this position is not material, it is positional. It is that these three pawns form a cohesive fighting unit. They can protect each other, they can work together, whereas this pawn, this h-pawn, is isolated and weak, and these two pawns are also isolated, and they are doubled. So they are this pawn here, the backwards one, is quite bad. It can't even move. So Magnus has to try to use his pawns to gain an advantage. And we see him roll on here. Roll on. He's rolled the old chariot along here. And Jan tries to form an attack. Now we can see maybe attacking e3. So we have to defend that. And just the perfect rook technique for Magnus that we are used to seeing. Maintaining the defense, and we see Jan clamping down with f5. But Magnus making some headway. Here we have a possible checkmating threat with queen e1. That could, so if you have queen e1 and then king f3, then queen f1, that would be checkmate. So we stop that. And just massage, managing Magnus is massaging f5 right now. But a cool indirect defense with queen to b3, so we cannot take that. Rook goes back, and we shuffle the pieces around. Is this another boring draw? Attack the queen. It is not a boring draw. One of these players will win this game, and at the end you will find out who. So one of the records that's going to be broken in this game is that this is going to be the longest World Championship game in history. And it's because of all these moves that I'm sort of going through here, where their players are just pitting their chess understanding against each other, saying who understands the imbalance better. And they're shuffling around, fighting for the most subtle advantage that you can imagine. Just trying to create something that the other does not understand quite as well. There's also like a great stamina battle going on, because they have at this point been playing for 4 hours, and now the pawn falls. So what is the point? The point is that you can actually sacrifice the rook in this way. So you have won a pawn, and we can capture here. Because when the king takes, we have this check that picks up the bishop. And now it starts to look a little tough for black, we must say. Here at move 82, we are almost, the game is about twice as long as chess games normally go. And white has managed to win a pawn. Queen centralizes and rook check. So now the rook is keeping the king back here. How can white advance? That is the question. And this is the type of position where you're going to see a lot of shuffling. You can see the queen all over the board. While Magnus, like, he plays these subtle moves here. And now he's trying to restrict the movement of the queen. So the queen got lured to h1. Now the escape path is being blocked by this knight. So it has to go out this way, which allows Magnus to centralize his rook as well and start attacking the h5 pawn. Jan, of course, harasses Magnus as much as possible so he will not lose the pawn. But Magnus has made headway because the rook is now behind the e-pawn. So he can start thinking about, okay, how do I get the e-pawn rolling? And we see a repetition not of moves but of ideas. And the king is still kept back, and we see like these moves repeat, but now Magnus finds a better way with the knight on g5. How can he start rolling? All of this maneuvering around, it's not, he's testing Jan Nepomniachtchi. He's saying, do you understand this position? And Jan is saying, I do, I'm not going to mess up. If you cannot find a way to push those pawns, you will not make any headway. Okay, so Magnus, you can see we now, for the third time, we have the knight going to f3 and with this idea, and the queen going out. Will there be a repetition of moves? No, because it's going to be a decisive game. So knight to g1, undeveloping itself to the starting square, unless, actually guys, I'm not sure, is this the knight on g1 or is the knight on b1 from the starting position? If somebody could find that out and put it in the comments, that would be cool. Okay, so attacking the rook. Rook has to move. Okay, rook. The rook gives a check. So why are they playing so many sort of non-moves? Well, guys, at this point, both players were playing on increment. They got 30 seconds every time they made a move, and they had a couple of minutes each on the clock. So they basically had no time at all. So Magnus is trying to make these quote-unquote easy moves that is not hurting his position. That is what he uses 50% of his capacity at, while the other 50% is doing a background process, trying to find a way. What is the construction? How do I push these pawns? That is the thing he needs to do to win the game. Also, he has great stamina. So every second, every minute, every 10 minutes, every hour that passes with the position being the same, his advantage will grow a little bit because he has greater stamina than Jan Nepomniachtchi, his Russian opponent. And we almost see a repetition. When will we get this move in? On move 110, we had it. E4. Some games that move is played on move 1. E4, pawn to e4 on move 1. But in this game, it was played on move 110. queen again to h1. Again. So Jan has not made any, like he's still playing queen to h1. He's still going around the same circle. But Magnus finally found a way to play e4. Check. King has to go back, not forward. And the knight takes care, obviously, of g3, so the queen is not really threatening anything here. But the point was this, to try and exchange the pawns, and we did. First with a check, and now we take the pawn. This we can now count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 pieces on the board. And there is something called an endgame tablebase. And what they have done is they have taken every possible position with, first they took every possible position with white king and black king and white pawn. And they made all the possible positions, and they had a computer calculate, very strong computer, calculate all the way until it was, they found out like what is the perfect move. Calculated all the possible variations. Then they added another piece to that equation and did a calculation again. Then they added another piece, and they got to 7. And all positions, I think every single position with 7 pieces or less. There might be some position with 7 pieces or left. I know every single position with 6 pieces on left or less left on the board, we know the perfect move. And I think also with 7 there might be some exceptions. And you could think, okay, so we are solving chess because they will do 8 next and we'll do 9, and when we have 32 we will know exactly what to play all the time. Well, no, because of a little mathematical concept called exponential growth, it is impossible to go to 8 pieces on the board. Because of exponential growth, we don't have enough room to store all the variations, and we don't have enough computer power. That's a little fun fact about math and chess for you. Another fun fact about this game is that we have an endgame table-based solution, and we know with perfect play what the result of this game would be. What do you think it would be? With absolutely 100% perfect play, this is a draw. But will they play perfect? Or will one player manage to put on enough pressure to make the other falter? Let's take a look. Magnus wants to push the pawns. Jan has to stop it. Okay. Can he do it? How can he do it? Like Jan is absolutely playing perfectly here. How can he do it? Where is the breakthrough? There's a check. But now we see e5. There's a 1 pawn push, and the king is advancing here. And on this machine that we have here, it still thinks it's equal. I happen to have looked at some cloud analysis on supercomputers, and I can tell you that this is not equal, and the table basis also confirms this. One side is winning. Who do you think is winning? And this is it. Excuse me, before it was still savable, but this is the losing move. Here there is a winning move for white. And do you think that the world champion can find the winning move? Can you find it? What would you play? What would you play? What would Capablanca play? What would Aljechin play? We will never know, but we know what Magnus would play, because he played e6. And if you think you're plundering your queen, nope, because knight g7, check to his majesty, and picking up the queen. So that's the point. And now Magnus has, with just like 30 seconds on the clock, getting 30 seconds more every move, to just play perfectly for some moves, and he will win the game. Can he do it? Queen attacks the pawn, but it's not a problem. We can, because of the knight, this, we can just do this here, and now you can think, okay, I can queen this pawn, but it's actually pretty important that there is only one move here that wins, and that is king to g5. With every other move, white will not be able to get what is known as the opposition, which is a half mathematical, half logical, maybe a third mathematical, a third logical, and a third chessical concept that I will make a video on at some point. It's absolutely crucial to get the opposition with the kings in order to win this game. So that is why you can sacrifice the pawn here. So we see king d8 instead, and Magnus is just a little bit even maybe sadistic here, because look at this, like the queen gets harassed, tries to go away, now knight g7, and how are you going to stop the pawns? The queening square is protected, the backwards pawn is protected, that pawn protects the other one, who protects the rook. We can maybe try to play queen h1, but it's checkmate in, I guess, maybe 16 moves or something from here. And that is the game. After 7.5 hours of play, after 136 moves, Magnus Carlsen wins his first classical world championship games in 5 years to take the lead in this match. What a game. What a match. Extremely impressive play by Nepomniachtchi. Unbelievable play by the man himself, the world champion, Magnus Carlsen. This has been ASMR Chess with an analysis of Game 6 of the 2021 World Chess Championship. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.